Welcome to Olympian Water Testing, giving you the best in water analysis. Today we are looking at, news-wise, the impact of mercury in New York State. And Biodiversity Research Institute announced that a series of multi-year scientific studies that assess the impact of mercury on air, water, fish, and wildlife in New York State was published in the Journal of Toxicology, an international journal devoted to presenting critical research on the effects of toxic chemicals on populations, communities, and terrestrial freshwater and marine ecosystems. What did they say? The wide collection of studies shows that the efforts to advance recovery from mercury pollution in New York State in recent years have yielded significant progress, says David Evers, PhD, pre-executive director and co-editor of the special issue. And while there is still much work to be done, the New York State synthesis becomes an important model for study, monitoring, and risk assessment of environmental mercury around the globe. The scientific collaboration funded by New York State Energy Research and Development Authority in 2018 through its environmental research program has resulted in 22 papers published in a Toxicology's December 2020 issue, as well as 2 separate papers that were published in October 2020 issue, which specifically focused on mercury in songbirds. Major findings of scientific synthesis of mercury in New York State include: New York features natural areas that are ecologically, culturally, and economically significant, but widely contaminated with mercury, largely due to atmospheric emissions and deposition. The scope and magnitude of the impact of mercury on fish and wildlife in New York State is much greater than previously recognized. Mercury concentrates exceed human and ecological risk thresholds in many areas, particularly in inland waters. The Adirondacks, Catskills, and parts of Long Island are particularly sensitive to mercury pollution. The impact of mercury emissions and deposition is exacerbated by landscape's characteristics. Abundant forests facilitate mercury deposition, while wetlands enhance transportation, methylene, and uptake, leading to elevated concentrations in aquatic and terrestrial food webs. Mercury concentrations in the environment of New York State have declined over the last 4 decades. Concurrent with decreased air emissions from regional and U.S. sources, after initial declines, however, concentrations of mercury in some fishes and birds from certain locations have stabilized or even increased in recent years, revealing complex trajectories of mercury recovery. And while the timing and magnitude of the response will vary, further controls on mercury emission sources are expected to continue to lower mercury concentrations in the food web, yielding multiple benefits to fish, wildlife, and the people of New York State. It is anticipated that the improvements will be the greatest inland lakes and roughly proportional to declines in mercury deposition. And under Governor Cuomo, New York has been a national leader in mercury emissions reduction, says Greg Lampan. And the environmental research program is also aiming to increase understanding and awareness of the environmental and public health impacts of energy choices and emerging energy options to provide a scientific foundation for creating effective and equitable energy-related environmental policies and resource management practices. So with all that being said, it is helpful to know that they are reducing the amount of mercury in water bodies. That being said, mercury still has an impact on New York State and other water bodies. That's why it's always a good idea to periodically test your water for any levels of mercury.